The most dangerous part of an Ice Age day wasn't the hunt, or the predators, or the walk across the frozen ground. It was lying down to sleep. Because sleep is the one time your body stops fighting the cold. You go still. You stop generating heat by moving. Your core temperature drops on purpose. For 8 hours, you hand yourself over to the night, defenseless against a cold that could kill you before morning. Somehow, your ancestors did this every single night through tens of thousands of years of ice, and the trick was never just a fire. To understand how strange that survival is, you have to understand what sleep actually does to your body, thermally. Right now, every night, as you drift off, your core temperature drops. This isn't an accident or a flaw. Lowering your core temperature is part of how your body initiates sleep in the first place. At the same time, two of your best defenses against cold switch off. You stop moving, and movement generates heat. And you stop being able to shiver on command because you're unconscious. So sleep is a perfect storm. Your body cools itself down. Right at the moment, you lose the two tools you'd normally use to warm yourself back up. In a heated bedroom, none of this matters. Your thermostat and your blanket quietly absorb the whole problem while you sleep through it. But take those away and drop the temperature to well below freezing. And that nightly cool down becomes the single most dangerous thing your body does. An Ice Age human lying down for the night was walking into a trap that the modern world has completely hidden from you. So, how did they get out of it? Night after night, for tens of thousands of years? The answer is not one trick. It's a stack of them, layered together, and the first one solves a problem you've probably never even thought about. Start with the ground. Here is something most people get wrong about cold. When you imagine freezing to death outdoors, you picture the cold air, the wind, the frost, the freezing sky, but the air is often not the thing that kills you fastest. The ground is. Cold air pulls heat from your body through convection, which is real but relatively slow. The frozen earth pulls heat through conduction direct contact, and conduction can be dramatically faster. Lie your warm body directly on frozen ground. And that ground will draw the heat out of you far quicker than the air above you ever could. It's like the difference between standing in a cold room and pressing your bare skin against a block of ice. Same temperature, completely different speed of heat loss. One is uncomfortable. The other can take your life in a matter of hours. This is the hidden killer of the Ice Age night. And it changes everything about how you have to survive it. It is also the reason so much of what follows makes sense only once you stop thinking about the air and start thinking about the earth. It means the real battle wasn't with the sky above the sleeping human. It was with the few inches of frozen earth directly beneath them. And it means the single most important thing an Ice Age human could do to survive the night was not to build a bigger fire. It was to get up off the ground. And this is exactly what we find. In caves and ancient sites, archaeologists have uncovered the remains of bedding layers of grass, leaves, and plant material, deliberately gathered and piled to sleep on. At one site in southern Africa, researchers found bedding tens of thousands of years old. Compressed layers of plants laid down as a sleeping surface, some of it chosen from plants that repel insects. This was not random debris. It was engineering. Picture an Ice Age family preparing their sleeping place as the light fails. They are not simply dropping to the ground where they stand. They are gathering armfuls of dry grass and bracken, shaking them out, building up a thick, springy layer between themselves and the frozen earth. To an outsider, it might look like nesting, like something an animal does on instinct. But there is hard knowledge buried in that gesture, knowledge earned over countless deaths. The understanding that the ground is the enemy, and that a barrier of dry, trapped air laid down beneath the body is the first and most important defense of the entire night. A thick layer of dry plant material, or later of fur and hide, does one crucial thing. It puts a cushion of still air between the sleeper and the cold earth, and still air is one of the best insulators there is. That barrier breaks the conduction. It stops the ground from stealing the body's heat. Before fire, before shelter, before anything else, the first rule of surviving the night was simple: never sleep directly on the cold ground. Now, the second layer. Now we can talk about fire. Fire is the obvious answer. And it was essential, but not in the simple way people imagine. Because a fire has a problem. It burns down. You cannot build a roaring blaze and then fall unconscious for 8 hours and expect it to still be burning at dawn. It needs feeding. Left alone, it fades to coals, and the coals fade to ash, and the deadliest cold of all the pre-dawn cold, the coldest hours of the night arrives exactly when an untended fire has burned lowest. So fire in the Ice Age wasn't a thing you lit and forgot. It was a thing you managed. Fires were built to be banked coals arranged, and partly covered with ash, so they smoldered slowly through the night, holding their heat for hours, ready to be revived at a touch. A banked fire was a kind of stored warmth, a reserve of heat and light that could be woken back into flame when the deepest cold arrived. And in a group, the natural spread of sleep meant that someone stirring in the night could feed the flames and push them back to life before they died completely. Fire wasn't a wall against the cold. It was a slow-burning heart at the center of the camp that had to be kept alive, tended in the dark by whoever happened to wake. But fire's heat also escapes into open air almost instantly. A fire under the open sky warms one side of you and loses the rest to the night. Which is why fire worked best, combined with the third layer, shelter. Shelter, in the Ice Age, was not about luxury. It was about trapping air. A cave, an overhang, a hut built of branches and hide, or in the great cold of the northern steppe, a dwelling built from the bones of mammoths. And covered in skins, all of these did the same essential job. On the treeless mammoth steppe, where there was almost no wood, people built the frames of their homes from enormous mammoth bones and tusks, dozens of them arranged into round dwellings, then draped with hides. It was staggering labor, and they did it. Because a home was not a comfort. It was survival equipment. Every one of these structures, from a simple cave to a mammoth bone hut, did one thing. It enclosed a pocket of space, and it let the heat of bodies and banked fire warm that pocket and stay there instead of vanishing into the open sky. A shelter turned the impossible task of heating the outdoors into the achievable task of heating a small, enclosed volume of air. Place a managed fire inside a small, insulated space. Fill it with the warmth of huddled bodies and a flame that could never hope to heat the frozen world outside can easily heat the tiny world within. The difference between sleeping under the open sky and sleeping in an enclosed shelter, in killing cold, is very often the difference between dying and living. And then there is the fourth layer, and it's one your own body still remembers the logic of other people. Ice Age humans did not sleep spread out. They slept packed together, huddled close, bodies against bodies, often with the smallest children, and the eldest tucked into the warmest positions in the middle of the pile. And this is not just for comfort. It is physics. A human body is a furnace, constantly producing heat, and a single body loses that heat to the cold on every exposed side. But push several bodies together, and the equation changes. The surfaces where they touch aren't bleeding heat into the night anymore, they're trading it back and forth, each warming the other. The group collectively has far less exposed surface relative to the total warmth it produces, so it loses heat more slowly than the same people ever could alone. Each sleeper becomes a heat source for the people pressed against them. A single person alone in that cold might not have survived the night at all. 10 of them together, sharing one pool of warmth, could. The huddle wasn't only a social arrangement or a habit of closeness. It was a shared survival system, a cluster of living furnaces keeping one another lit until dawn, so that a cold, which could kill any one of them alone, could be beaten by all of them together. Now add the final layer, the one worn on the body itself, clothing. By the height of the Ice Age, humans weren't just draping themselves in raw hides. They were making tailored, fitted clothing, and we know this because of a tiny, world-changing tool, the eyed needle. A sliver of bone with a hole punched through one end, the needle made it possible to sew, to stitch hides into close-fitting garments that trapped a layer of warm air against the skin and sealed out the wind. It is easy to overlook something so small, but the eyed needle was as important as any spear or blade our ancestors ever made. Draped, loose hides let warm air escape at every gap. Sewn, fitted clothing closed those gaps, wrapping the body in a sealed envelope of trapped, body-warmed air. Fitted, layered fur clothing was, in effect, a shelter. You could wear portable insulation that traveled with the person who made it, that kept working while they slept, that turned their own body heat into a warm shell wrapped around them. And the same principle carried directly into sleep, as people wrapped themselves in furs and hides, that did for the whole body what the grass bedding did from below, sealed off the cold, and held the warmth in. Now step back and see the whole thing at once. Because this is the real answer, and it's the thing the single word replies always miss. There was no one trick. Nobody survived the Ice Age night because they had a fire, full stop. They survived because of a system, layered defense on top of defense. Insulation from the ground below. A managed, banked fire at the center. A shelter to trap the warmth. A huddle of bodies sharing heat. And tailored clothing sealing it all around the skin. Think about how these layers work together, each covering for the weaknesses of the others. The fire burns down in the night, but the shelter holds its warmth, and the huddle keeps producing more. The clothing seals the body, but the bedding stops the ground from stealing heat. Where clothing presses thin, no single layer is enough. A fire in the open still loses its heat to the sky. Clothing alone still lets the frozen ground drain a sleeper laid on bare earth. Bodies huddled together in the open, with no shelter and no fire, still slowly lose the fight. But stack all five together, and each one closes a gap the others leave open until there is no longer a path for the cold to win. Remove any single layer and the others might not be enough. Together, they turned a death trap into a survivable night. That is not luck. That is one of the most sophisticated survival systems any animal has ever built, assembled piece by piece over tens of thousands of years, just to solve the problem of going to sleep. So come back now, out of that frozen dark, to your own bed. Tonight, your body will do the exact same thing it did 20,000 years ago. As you fall asleep, your core temperature will drop. You'll stop moving. You'll stop shivering. You will become, for 8 hours, just as thermally vulnerable as any Ice Age human ever was. The entire difference is that a wall of invisible systems now stands between you and the cold. A heated home doing the work of the shelter. A blanket doing the work of the bedding and the furs. A thermostat doing the work of the banked fire that someone once had to wake in the night to feed. You get to take all of it completely for granted. Your ancestors could take none of it for granted, ever. Every warm night they survived was earned, layer by layer, against a cold that was genuinely trying to kill them in their sleep. You fall asleep without a second thought. That thoughtlessness is the luxury. It's the prize your ancestors won for you, across 100,000 freezing nights, so that you would never have to know how hard it once was simply to close your eyes in the cold and wake up warm. If you made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. We make videos like this one every week about ancient human behavior, about what your body still remembers, and about the gap between the world you were built for and the one you actually live in. If that is something you want more of, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of storytelling is worth keeping alive. See you in the next one.